Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. It's so interesting to witness the recurring patterns that cycle through our very lives, through a variety of epochs, and through a litany of civilizations and eras throughout history. It's sometimes easy to get caught up in our own little sliver of this continuing timeline and think that our particular pattern is unique. While its context may be, the pattern may very well be something that nature seems to exemplify in numerous ways, on numerous levels. It seems that humankind at some point in ancient history, and perhaps even prehistory, had some sort of awareness of its place within the cosmos and wove that into the fabric of its day-to-day existence. And then gradually, this awareness gave way to alchemy and eventually science. Then the scope of science became more and more focused on phenomena that were tangible to the senses, like matter and physics and money. Eventually, any sort of spiritual practice became the stuff of legends and tales, and material reductionism paved the way for the exploitation of nature and led to a major disconnect between humans and their environment. But lately, we are seeing that science is gradually finding its way back to a more expansive understanding of interconnectedness and the holographic nature of reality. Today's guest, Jude Currivan, has written a book about this new understanding called The Cosmic Hologram: Information at the Center of Creation. I start off the conversation by asking her how she came to study physics and archaeology.
It's a long story, and it goes back to when I was very young, and it didn't really start with either physics or archaeology. It started with an experience when I was 4 years old, and growing up in the north of England, the daughter and granddaughter of coal miners, we weren't an academic household. We were very down to earth, very, blue collar, as my American friends would say. But when I was 4 years old, I had an experience of a discarnate light appearing to me. And I was hearing a voice coming from that light. And at 4 years old, it's nothing to tell me that it wasn't normal. There was nothing to say it was the most natural thing in the world.
Yeah.
So from that moment on and over the next, my whole life since, I've been walking between worlds, literally, experiencing what my friend Dean Radin of the Institute of Noetic Sciences called supernormal phenomena. Telepathy, remote viewing, all of that, precognition. So I was experiencing reality and realities in a much grander, bigger way than this particular realm we call physical. And so what I was finding is I was both having a fantastic time. I was having such a lot of fun exploring these realms, and being guided to do so and being communicated with and invited to undertake this, what's become a lifelong adventure. But I was also very curious about, okay, if I'm experiencing these realities that it seems that others aren't, how does the reality that my day-to-day life experience, how does that come about from these more higher vibrational, strange, wonderful realms? So I wanted to understand how of that. And that led me to physics, and it led me to astronomy. And, since then, and over 60 plus years of research and study and exploration, I've now come to a perception that I'm sharing with everyone of indeed how, an eternal and an infinite cosmic mind, as Einstein would have called it, creates what we call our universe, and does so through algorithms, instructions that we call the laws of physics. So by studying physics, which I did, but also in this much wider way, I've been able to come to an understanding of how our wonderful, gorgeous universe is created by cosmic mind, and a realization that mind and consciousness aren't what we have. They're literally what we and the whole world are. And the archaeology came about really because there's so much ancient wisdom that for many people is just disregarded.
Absolutely.
And yet as we go back, to the ancient Egypt, ancient India, ancient China, indigenous wisdom, there's so much that, this new paradigm of holistic science, of post-materialistic science, is converging with, as it is with universal spiritual teachings. So that's where those two started, but they've been very much ongoing threads in my own journey of exploration ever since that little 4-year-old of me began those first steps.
Yeah, well, how do you think that ancient wisdom morphed into materialist science? How did that change occur? That seems to be a step backwards to me, rather than a step forwards.
In many ways, I sort of see it more as the spiral. When you go up a spiral staircase, you sort of go around and find yourself again, but you're another step higher. Mm-hmm. So for me, the ancient, first of all, I think it's very important to realize, and when I was doing my PhD in archaeology, there was still, this is what, nearly 20 years ago, there was still a perception that of the reasons why ancient civilizations died. And we're now realizing more and more that a lot of them perished through climate change. And basically people either polluting or just over-exploiting their environment allied to climate change. And that seemed to have happened in South America. It's certainly in northeastern India. It's happened periodically in ancient Egypt and China. So wisdom was lost, or certainly the majority of it was lost. So it's only been a sort of an underground thread that's held on to such ancient wisdom. So certainly by the Middle Ages in Europe, there was very little remaining understanding of the ancient wisdom of India, of China, of Persia, of Egypt, of all of it. Very little understanding. And so that time, and through the Renaissance, and then the time of people like Galileo and Copernicus and Newton, there was also a new urge really to try and understand the natural world more so, because up till then it had been more philosophical. It was ideas about the natural world. But people like Galileo were all about discovering what the natural world really was and is. So he discovered that, the moons of Jupiter. So with him and the other, they called themselves natural philosophers, but really they were experimentalists, they were discoverers. And because they also lived in a time when the Catholic Church was incredibly powerful, and what they were doing was seen as being heretical, it was very dangerous to be making the sort of discoveries that they were making. So some were actually killed for not recanting their discoveries. But others went on to say, look, okay, we'll keep to our exploration of the physical world, and we won't impose in any way on the spiritual religious teachings of the day. So as a result, there became a schism. Science began to go one way and religion continued on another way. And over many years and centuries, the split became wider and wider until scientists really, at the end of the 19th century, were really peripheralized, not just religion, but spirituality, and a perception that somehow there was something more than the physical realm. So scientists just became more and more and more focused on the appearance of physical reality and less interested and actively disinterested in understanding its deeper causality.
Yes.
Yeah. And so even when quantum physics, the discoveries of quantum physics and relativity theory came along, which upended all of the old mechanistic science, nonetheless, the folks like Max Planck and Albert Einstein, although they had a profound awareness of consciousness, their views on consciousness were put right to the side. And so from then until very recently, any mention of consciousness to a physicist has usually resulted in them running from the room. And yet it is the elephant in the room. You cannot understand reality without understanding the nature of consciousness.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm so glad that science is finally sort of circling back around to that realization and maybe becoming a little more humble in its approach to the universe.
And realizing that consciousness does not have to be conjoined with religious organization.
Absolutely. That's the thing too, is I think is a very simple dualism that doesn't have to exist. It seems like there's one end of the spectrum where you are a spiritual person and maybe you disregard science in a sense, but you are aware of the potential of a spiritual plane and something that can't be quantized in physical terms. And then you have the atheist who is almost a fundamentalist in the sense that nothing gets past them that can't be quantified by science. So you have somebody that doesn't believe in the existence of necessarily things that you don't see, and they are tethered to the physical world. And people act like you have to be one or the other. And I think there's so many shades of gray in between those two extremes.
Well, there's a whole piano keyboard between those extremes, as my dear friend Elizabeth Sartoris talks about. She says exactly what you're saying. The upper end of the piano keyboard are the folks who are very spiritual, and they sort of look sometimes down at the more physical stuff. And there's the folks in the physical stuff who say, oh, no, the upper notes are nonsense. And as she said, it's the entire keyboard.
Yes.
And it's all of and one of the things that I don't tend to often use as a word anymore, and it's not because I dishonor it, I totally honor it, but even the notion of spirituality still implies a separation. We talk about mind, body, and spirit as if somehow they're separate, when in fact they're interwoven and all part of realities that are conscious and essentially unified. I think the other point you make is really valuable because for me, science is about following the evidence wherever it leads.
Yeah.
And there's something called scientism,
yes.
which is the sort of religious equivalent
yeah,
of fundamentalism in religion, which is
yes.
about, fundamentalist science, where it's unwilling to follow that evidence. And you think back, and for people who say, well, I can't see it. I can't. Well, you can't see radio waves.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't see X-rays. You
Absolutely.
can't see so much. And
Wi-Fi,
exactly. So, if that was the criterion, we would not be able to be having this conversation.
Yes. Without a big cable linking my computer to your computer.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier that the concept of a mind being behind the machinations of the universe. So that would imply that you do not feel that the universe is random in nature. Would that be correct?
That would be very correct. I mean, Einstein, I think, said something along the lines of, you can treat everything as if it's a miracle or nothing as if it's a miracle. There's no middle road in a way. And so for me, and I think this is where the evidence is leading, and this is really an exciting time because, we're talking initially about the times we live in and the possibility, not only of a breakdown, but a breakthrough. And for me, a breakthrough involves healing our fragmented perceptions of the nature of reality itself. So literally healing our worldview, because our beliefs drive our behaviors. So, and what's so exciting for me at this time is that there is the evidence at all scales of existence that indeed not only does our universe exist and evolve as a unified entity, but that literally it is an informed and holographic expression of cosmic mind. So it is consciousness, and we are microcosmic co-creators of our universe's impulse, not just to exist, but to evolve.
That makes absolute sense to me. What evidence maybe can you share with us that kind of indicates or confirms that the nature of reality is indeed co-collaborative?
It's co-collaborative, but we are microcosmic co-creators, because I sometimes sense that people think, well, I am the universe. Well, we're all of us parts of aspects of a universe that is innately intelligent as and of itself. But yeah, the evidence, it's at all scales. So we're seeing the same information. First of all, let me go back a stage. What we're realizing is that the 20th century science of energy and matter and space and time is valid, but it's not fundamental. We need to go to a deeper level that actually is a causative realm from which the appearance of our universe emerges. So the appearance of our universe of energy and matter and space-time comes from a deeper causative impulse. And that causative impulse is cosmic consciousness, but it's expressed in an incredibly simple way. Our English alphabet has 26 letters, but from it, which of themselves, each letter has no meaning that we can ascribe to it, but when we put those letters together for words and sentences and poems and songs, they have meaning, they embody meaning for us. Well, our universe builds meaning from a universal alphabet of just 2 letters, and they are ones and zeros of digital information. But the way they come together, whether they come together in the laws of physics or come together in a leaf, a plant, a tree, a planet, a person, they all embody and embed meaning. So the entire universe at every scale of its existence has this embedded informational meaning that is dynamic, so that it not only exists, but it literally evolves. So there's a massive amount of evidence on all of that I put into my book, The Cosmic Hologram. But the 2 recent pieces of evidence that show this on a cosmological level, in other words, the scale of the entire universe, have come up in the last couple of years. The first one was a collaboration of 5 universities in 2017 that were looking at patterns in what's called the cosmic microwave background, and that is relic radiation that's left over from a period only 380,000 years from the beginning of the universe. It was the first moment when our universe cooled enough to allow light to flow freely. And at that time, there was this relic radiation that now fills the whole of space. It's called the cosmic microwave background, or CMB for short. And these astronomers discovered informational patterns within the CMB that embody what I term the cosmic hologram. In other words, they show the characteristic signatures of slight differences and patterns that show these informational relationships filling the whole of space. The other thing that was shown in 2018 was a team at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT for short. And this is a phenomenon called non-locality, and it goes back to the beginnings of quantum theory. And quantum theory predicted something called non-locality, which was essentially that our universe, for quantum mechanics to work as a whole, our entire universe needed to be non-locally interconnected beyond the realm, beyond the speed of light, so that within our universe, nothing can go faster, no signal can go faster than the speed of light. And that's important, and we can come back to why it's important, but we wouldn't be here if it wasn't the case. But nonetheless, as a whole, our universe is also, and it's not an either or, is also needs to be non-locally connected or entangled. Now, it was not until the 1980s that the experimenters were able to actually show the evidence for this in the laboratory. And they started showing it at quantum scales, tiny, tiny scales, which is where it had been predicted. But of course, it was predicted at the scale of our entire universe. So essentially, that then continued to become more and more sophisticated. And they were able to show such non-local entanglement at the scale of organic molecules and even small diamonds. And by non-local entanglement, it meant that if the state of one, whether it's one quantum or photon or even an organic molecule, its quantum state shifted, a partner was immediately shifted to mirror it. So no signal passed between them within space and time, and yet it was as if they were spontaneously mirroring each other, and that's non-local. And in 2018, the MIT researchers were able to non-locally entangle photons of light in the laboratory with starlight from 600 light years away, and from light from two what's called quasars, which are really powerfully active galactic nuclei. One was 7.8 billion light years away. The other was 12.2 billion light years away.
My God.
And that's the scale of the universe. And of course, non-locality is vital to form a framework for things such as telepathy and remote viewing and precognition. Yeah? So all those non-local phenomena, have been searching in a way for a unifying framework to fully explain why they are natural, why they're a natural aspect of our universe.
And what does non-local coherence have to do with all of that?
That's exactly what it is, because if something's non-locally coherent, coherence means that it's aligned, it's both resonant and aligned.
Sure.
So sometimes it's called non-local coherence or entanglement or just non-locality, but it's all it's all a description of what I've just been sharing.
Sure. Well, so, if reality is co-collaborative, then what does that mean our responsibility within it is?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, for me, it means that we do have innate meaning and purpose, because our entire universe has innate meaning and purpose. It literally is set up so exquisitely that it doesn't just exist as a unified entity, a finite thought form within the infinite and eternal mind of the cosmos, but it literally is set up so extraordinarily, precisely, that it exists to evolve from simplicity to complexity. So beginning with hydrogen atoms, over 13.8 billion years, it's evolved into stars and galaxies and planets and plants and people. So we are at the bow wave. We literally stand on the bow wave of space and time. We are the microcosmic co-creators of our universe's inherent evolutionary impulse. And we are at an evolutionary moment, because we're at this moment of breakdown and breakthrough. And the breakthrough for me is the potential for us to consciously evolve. and literally remember the unity of all that we call reality and its wondrous diversity. And instead of being essentially plunderers, we are we've been a caterpillar species. We've existed to eat. We've been plunderers of our environment.
Yeah.
And yet it's as though now we're undergoing a process potentially of metamorphosis. We're in a chrysalis, whether it's the place of our own home or collectively, we're in a chrysalis where the old is dissolving. It no longer serves us. It no longer serves our planetary home. And in its place, the imaginal cells of an emergent butterfly are forming. And butterflies, as caterpillars exist to eat, butterflies exist to pollinate, to fertilize life. So for me, this is a moment where the evolutionary impulse of our universe can flow through us to transform us from polluters and predators and all that we've been into pollinators.
I like it. That makes much more sense to me than any of the garbage I grew up listening to in science class in school, for sure. So all of this would lend me to think, I mean, we hear, as we were being taught in school when we were growing up, that, basically this Big Bang and all of this just happened randomly. It's just a matter of luck that we ended up where we were. And what you're saying, and what I believe to be true too, is that there isn't randomness, that everything, there's no element in the universe that isn't there for a reason. Is that what you're taking from this too?
Oh, very much. And this has been for me, I'm 68 now, so this has been a 64-year-old journey of bringing this and exploring and experiencing this. Absolutely. I mean, for physicists and cosmologists who actually are on their own in a journey of connection, because it seems to me, I think what we were saying earlier is understanding this isn't enough until you actually almost accept the invitation of this ancient new way of understanding the unity and the oneness of all that is, and enter into an adventure with it. And that's on an inner level of connectivity, as well as then an outer level of experiencing that in the world. If you're not on that inner journey of realizing and remembering that connection, it's very easy to look out into the world and see its appearance of apparent, seeming separation. And, physicists are taught that old paradigm of separation. And so unless you bring consciousness, this elephant in the room consciousness, in as being fundamental, it's almost impossible to understand how reality creates itself and is created by the cosmos. You can't, in my experience, you cannot do it without understanding the fundamental nature and role of consciousness. But if you do understand that, you then almost immediately begin to see how the laws of physics are so simple and yet so exquisitely ordered and relational to allow our universe to exist and evolve, not randomly, but meaningfully and purposefully. You also realize that the Big Bang wasn't big, and it wasn't a bang. It wasn't an explosive, chaos. Instead, our universe began in an incredibly ordered state of its lowest possible informed content, rather like a new baby. A new baby is born with the DNA and its cells and all the rest of it, but it has no experience. So our universe was born like a baby universe with all that it needed then to evolve into what it has become, to evolve its simplicity into complexity. So instead of describing that first moment as a Big Bang, I talk of it as being the first moment of an ongoing big breath as space expands and time flows. And that really reflects far more the ancient understanding of our universe as an out breath of the cosmos. It's now we're realizing the literal reality of that, and scientifically so. And the other thing is that, again, the evidence is so clear that whenever we actually see, when we study complex systems, wherever there is appearance of randomness, there's been some really good work on this, it shows that if you actually go under the surface of that appearance, there is always relational order. There's always order that underpins that apparent chaos, that apparent randomness.
Yeah, it seems like what we call chaos is just something that seems that way when we're in the midst of it. But if we zoom back,
Yeah,
then we can see the sort of the fractal sort of order of it. That's a very
absolutely.
stoner way of putting it, but
it's the truth. I mean, this is what was so amazing with the work that Benoit Malchabrot did, because he's the father of fractals, and bless him, he spent, I think, something like a decade studying apparently random changes in things like the stock market, randomness, the apparent randomness of coastlines, and subsequently others, the random outlines of clouds. And what he discovered, and others that have gone since then, and certainly with the advent of computers able to analyze huge amounts of data, the apparent randomness is being shown exactly as you say, to actually embody fractal, relational, geometric patterns. And fractal really is a shortened version of what he referred to as fragmented dimensions. And you can go very mathematical nerd here, but probably the best thing to do is go onto YouTube and just Google fractals and see some of the most gorgeous images, scaling down and scaling up, because that's what fractal patterns do. They scale down ever smaller, they scale up ever larger, but they hold their relationships as patterns. And we find those fractal patterns from the atomic scale to essentially the scale of our entire universe.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And you also, a concept that you bring up more than a few times in the cosmic hologram is that matter itself, or physical reality, is informational in nature. What do you mean by that? And by that token, is the spiritual realm also informational in nature?
Yes, I would say so. In information, and I spell it with a hyphen.
Yes.
Because often when we talk about information, we are talking about, often the perception is of just data, sometimes apparently random data. And I'm talking about everything we call reality is meaningful in hyphen formation, which literally informs the forms of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is that intentionality and meaningfulness of information. And yeah, I mean, the 20th century science was amazing in what it brought forward, and the understanding of the complementarity of energy and matter, E equals mc squared, and the conjoining of space and time into invariant space-time. But what we're realizing now is that they are the emergent appearance of more fundamental realms of causation, and that therefore energy and matter and space and time are complementary expressions of information. And there's a whole sort of framework that I set out in the cosmic hologram with the evidence for this. But to go back to your point around matter, as physicists have known for a very, very long time, that when you drill down to smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller scales, atomic scales, subatomic scales, and even smaller, that what we call solid matter is actually 99.99999999999% no thingness. And what remains aren't minute little billiard balls, zipping around. It's literally relational fields of influence. And those relational fields of influence are actually in formation itself. And the first time that this was demonstrated experimentally was in 2012, when the scientists they erased one digitized bit of information and released energy, released heat. And that was in line with theoretical predictions. And that then linked information, a digitized bit of information, with something that we consider physical. And further experiments since then have shown that, information actually expresses itself as energy matter. So we're really going to have to reframe what we call physical, just as we're needing to reframe what we call spiritual, and realize that all that we call realities at many multidimensional levels of existence are all cosmic mind. They're all mind and consciousness expressed as meaningful in formation.
I love it. And it seems like we have a bad habit, we meaning humans, have a bad habit of extracting ourselves from nature. And that is an illusion in and of itself, right? Because we think that there's this natural environment that we are living on right now, this planet, and we are just going around setting up shop with no regard for natural, quote unquote, natural ecosystems or patterns or ways of functioning that aren't so disruptive. So we tend to separate ourselves as some sort of an aberration, but that's a huge mistake, right?
Oh, it's not just a huge mistake, it's hugely dangerous, as we've found, because when we separate ourselves artificially from nature, from our planetary home, which is the only home we have, we cause a sort of destruction and chaos and damage that we have been doing. Yet when we remember our relationship and our oneness with our planetary home, and indeed the whole cosmos, then we can live in harmony. We can become conscious co-evolutionary partners with our planetary home, And going back to your point about ecosystems, fractal patterns, we find the same fractal patterns playing out through all scales of ecosystems as we do in the internet. And we find the same relational patterns playing out in the frequency and the destructive power of earthquakes as we do in the frequency and destruction of human conflicts.
And I've heard that the way that cars and vehicles sort of coagulate in a traffic jam is the way that ice forms, or the way that water forms into ice, which I thought was very fascinating.
Absolutely. So, and so the evidence is overwhelming. If you really want to say, if people want to say, show us the evidence for this, the evidence is overwhelming. But it's also, I think, it's also about how you perceive whatever evidence there is, because, we know we also have a human propensity for what's called cognitive bias. Mm-hmm. We see what we want to see. We talk about seeing is believing, but actually there are so many experimental studies showing that believing is seeing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always am reminded by a quote of, I think it was Marcel Proust, that the journey of discovery is not discovering new lands, but seeing with new eyes. Mm-hmm. So I think this is vital. It's for us to be able to see this unity and diversity, which is the reality of the world, of the whole world, with new eyes. And my sense is that is calling us and inviting us not to just understand that, because that isn't sufficient. It's to begin to experience that. And what's happening now with physical distancing and social connecting is somehow helping us to remember that interconnectedness.
Yeah, definitely. In many, many ways, on many levels. Yeah, it's pretty astounding. So if we can say that everything in the observable universe has a purpose, what would you say purpose means in this instance, in this context?
It's almost a non-judgmental sense of it, and it goes beyond a human sense of it. And when you look at the laws of physics and the way that our universe was set up from the simplest possible beginnings, it literally was set up to not just to exist, but to exist to evolve, not just to exist and evolve, but set up to exist to evolve from simplicity to complexity. So from hydrogen atoms to hydrogen and helium to the first stars, to the first stars that when they died, they exploded and seeded the interstellar medium with all the elements that they'd created during their lifetime. So more stars could come along and they could aggregate into galaxies, and after billions of years, galaxies and the interstellar dust clouds that they embedded had all the nutrients to be able to birth planetary systems like ours, like our sun, and planets, rocky planets such as Earth, and rocky planets such as Earth that lived in the Goldilocks zones, not too hot, not too cold, so liquid water could exist. So biological life could start to emerge. So biological life could start to emerge from its simplest. And by the way, I'm writing the next book called Gaia Her Story about all of this. And there's a view now that viruses were the beginnings of life.
Oh, wow.
And have been evolutionary agents ever since. There are viruses that guide the formation of babies in the womb. Isn't that incredible?
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, this whole then, after 9 billion years or thereabouts, here we are with our planetary home in its infancy. And again, another incredible chapter of our universe's story, such that everything was able to nurture the emergence of biological life. From that very beginning, through the first cells to multicellular creatures and onto us. And what we're told at school, saying going back to school, often we're told at school when we're taught about evolution, the survival of the fittest, as though it's a competition and it's dog eat dog and all the rest of it. No. As simplicity evolves to complexity, yes, there's levels of competition, but complexity is founded on cooperation. Every single time when biological life, evolved from its simpler to its more complex embodiment, it involved cooperation. So within us, within every cell within us, is something called mitochondria. And they are the little engines that without it we wouldn't be able to breathe and live, because we wouldn't be able to have any energy. There are little energy engines, and they were once independent, tiny little microscopic organisms. And then they did a deal. They did a deal with cells, and they went inside cells, and the cells protected them, and in turn they were able to provide the energy from sunlight and oxygen to fuel the cells.
Wow. Woo! I love it. And your book is just filled with stuff like that. As when we were corresponding before the interview, I was going, I don't know if I can condense this into questions. There are so many mind-blowing things that you were talking about in there. It's really fantastic, and I highly recommend it to anybody. Just a couple more questions, and then I will let you go about your life. And I appreciate you so much for agreeing to do this conversation.
You're very welcome.
Why you mentioned in the book of quite a few times that that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, and that sort of got brought up earlier in the interview. Why is that so, and why is that an important thing to know?
Nothing can go faster than the speed of light within space and time.
Within space and time.
Within, because I mentioned earlier about our entire universe is non-locally connected. Think this isn't quite the way, but think of our universe as a balloon, okay? Mm-hmm. And the surface of the balloon is expanding because space expands. Yeah?
Yeah.
So each moment, space is expanding and time is flowing. And yet the surface of the balloon literally joins the balloon together. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So that is that non-local connection to enable our universe to exist and evolve as a unified, as a coherent entity. But within space-time, as space expands and time flows, light, the speed of light is a cosmic speed limit, which means that no signal can travel faster than the speed of light. And what that does, from the very beginning of our universe, there is an arrow of time, an arrow of causality. So yesterday is before today, which is before tomorrow, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
On a universal level, from the very first moment of that big breath, all through the lifetime of our universe. But also, because space is expanding, and we haven't time to go into the holographic nature of this, but essentially all of the information and informational content of our universe is also increasing in every moment. So the speed of light both gives a causality of our universe's entire life story and our own, but it also means that yesterday you and I had less experience, we embodied less informational content in our life stories than we do today, and we will tomorrow. And just as that's true of us, it's true of our entire universe. So if light didn't have that that speed limit, or if there wasn't a speed limit, then we wouldn't have, our universe would not be able to evolve. There would not be such a thing called time. And what light does, it interweaves energy and matter together, because Einstein's E equals mc squared is energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So the very relationship between energy and matter is mediated by light and the speed of light. And equally, when Einstein understood the relativity of space and the relativity of time as to then it perceived separate entities, he realized that our universe couldn't exist if space-time itself was relative. So he actually had this incredibly genius leap when he understood that time is relative to an observer, a position, a location in space is relative to an observer, but when they're brought together, they form something called space-time, and that is invariant, which means that the laws of physics are exactly the same here on Earth as they are in a galaxy far, far away and a long, long time ago. So space and time themselves are woven together by the speed of light. So it's absolutely fundamental.
And what role does gravity play in the holographic nature of space-time?
Gravity isn't, what people are starting to understand, which I think Einstein did, is that gravity is less a force of nature, a force of our universe, than it is a consequence. And so what we're realizing is that if we're going to bring quantum mechanics and relativity theory together, we need to do so through a relationship with a third fundamental law or laws of our universe, which are the laws of thermodynamics. So I've been working on bringing the two laws of thermodynamics as laws of information together with relativity and quantum mechanics, both of which as complementary expressions of information. And it's a bit like a very simple Rubik's Cube. When you do that, it all goes click, 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 and you realize that gravity is rather like a bridge between energy, matter, and space-time.
Fabulous. We could, I don't know what to say to that. We could probably take this into several hours, but that means you'll just have to come back and talk again. No, I mean,
be delighted to. Seriously, Chris, I'd be very happy to.
I made that sound like you didn't have a choice in the matter, but of course you do.
Bless you. But I'd be delighted to. And maybe once Gaia, her story, has written me, and this wonderful story of our beloved planetary home has honoured me and written me, then there'd be a great time to come back.
Fantastic. When are you looking to have that published?
I think you should be asking Gaia that. I have no idea. My sense is for the manuscript, hopefully, to be completed by the fall, and then sometime next year, I hope for the book to come out.
Fabulous. Will it be out on Inner Traditions? I
hope so. It's obviously up for my my publisher there, but I really hope they're happy to take it.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds very promising. Would you tell the listeners where they can find you online and follow your work, and also get your books?
Thank you. Well, my personal website is just my name, www.jude, Jude, Currivan, Currivan.com. But I co-founded something called Whole World View, that coincided with the publication of the Cosmic Hologram 3 years ago. So we have a website and lots of YouTube videos and resources, and folks can sign up there to our newsletter, which is far better than trying to join up to my personal newsletter, which is www.wholeworld, that's WHOLE, world, WORLD, view, VIEW.org, and we have a Facebook community, Whole World View. We have a YouTube channel that can be accessed through the website, and we have a free newsletter that people are very welcome to subscribe to. And you can get the Cosmic Hologram. Folks can get the Cosmic Hologram either from Amazon or from any good bookseller. And it's available in, I think, 6 other languages now as well.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Yeah, I will provide all those links in the episode information. So it will be a click away for anybody who's interested in following any of those leads. Jude, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I really loved your book, and I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in the holographic nature of the universe and how it's just one co-collaborative what would be a way of putting it? Work of
adventure.
Yes, I like it. Yeah, that makes much more sense. Yes, I highly recommend it. And yeah, let's do this again when your book comes out, and we'll take it from there.
I'd love that, Chris, and many, many thanks. I've loved being together, and much love to you and to all those who are listening. And everybody at this time, everyone at this time.
What a delightful conversation. I'll have to admit, when I was reading Jude's really dense book, I'm just packed with all of this information, and some of it very mind-blowing, but some of it I felt like it was going over my head. And I started to panic a little bit. I was wondering if I was at the level to be interviewing somebody about a book like this. And, I started to get cold feet. I was wondering if I should, opt out, to politely bow and thank Jude for her agreeing to come on and just leave it at that. But then I decided just to do it anyway. I think it's good to expand our comfort zones, what we're uncomfortable with, or what we're afraid of, what makes us nervous or feel intimidated. That's where we need to explore. Those are things that we need to learn more about so that we're not intimidated by them. So I kept moving forward, and Jude was very encouraging, and I think that it turned out great. I think it was a fantastic conversation. I learned a hell of a lot. I can get a lot out of a conversation, sometimes more than I can get out of a book. Or I should say it's denser, because hearing somebody speak it sometimes is just it just makes more sense to my brain. So this was great. I can't wait to go back and listen to this conversation again. I was really pleased with it. So I look forward to Jude's next book. And again, all of the links that she mentioned there towards the end, I will include in the notes for the episode. At this point, I would like to thank you all very, very much for listening. You are very appreciated, and I hope that you have been enjoying what you've been hearing. If you have, and you feel strongly enough about it, there are ways that you can help kind of keep this thing going and make it even better and bigger than it is right now. You can go to my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. And from $1 up, whatever you think it's worth, you can kind of set up a subscription where it will automatically take that out of your bank account every month. And if you are able to contribute that way, it would be so greatly appreciated. And any amount, again, I hate to have a specific paywall that people have to get past in order to get to anything else. But so I'm trying to be fair and have it be sliding. And I'm not trying to say that people who do that are unfair. They have their way of doing things and it works for them and it seems to be fine for their listeners. So more power to them. But I'm going to try and do it this way and see how well I can do with that. I'm open to suggestions, of course, but for now, this is how I'm going to do it. If you cannot contribute financially, and believe me, I know exactly what that's like, there are other ways you can help. You can go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever it is that you get to this podcast or subscribe to it, and you can leave a good review or a good rating, or you can share wherever it is that you share stuff like that. You can share the podcast links to particular episodes or the whole website, themeltpodcast.com. That is a huge help, spreading the word around. That's mostly how people find out about this. So that would be a huge help. I am very excited about the last few episodes that I've had. I think that they've been fantastic guests, fantastic subject matter. I really love this interview and everything that we talked about, and there's more of the same to come. So I'm very excited to put all of this stuff out. Right now, I can really afford time-wise and money-wise to put out 2 episodes a month, one every other Friday. I would love to put more episodes out than that, but I need help doing it. I have to work because I have to eat and I have kids that need to eat. So I have to do stuff for money. Unfortunately, this isn't it right now, but I would love for this to be it. Then I could throw everything that I have at it and it would be a much, much better podcast. Anyway, so if you can help in any of those ways, it would be greatly appreciated. And I'm always accepting stories of firsthand experiences that you might have with kind of the kinds of things that I talk about here on the Melt. And you can send those to themeltpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you all so much for listening. You're greatly appreciated. I hope that you enjoy and are informed by the things that you have heard. Take care of yourself, and until next time.